Caleb Thornton dropped to his knees in the snow rifle, slipping from frozen fingers. 6 children huddled before him in that crumbling barn, their eyes hollow, their lips blue, their small bodies trembling like leaves in a hurricane. But it was the oldest girl who shattered him completely. Brown eyes flecked with gold, that pointed chin, dark hair falling across her forehead. His daughter Charlotte's face staring back from a stranger's body. 4 years since he'd buried his family. 4 years of silence. And now this. Before we begin, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you haven't already, subscribe and follow these 6 little souls to the very end. Now, let's step into the storm. The screaming started just past noon. Caleb Thornton had been riding the north fence line for 3 hours, checking posts that didn't need checking, fixing wire that wasn't broken. Anything to fill the silence. Anything to keep moving through another day that felt exactly like the 364 days before it and the 1400 days before that. 4 years, 4 winters, 4 eternities since the fever took them. His mare Bess stopped dead, ears pinned back, nostrils flaring. Easy, girl. But she wasn't having it. The old horse stamped and snorted, head swinging toward the eastern ridge where the abandoned garret barn sat rotting on the hillside. Then he heard it again. A child's scream, high and raw and desperate. Caleb's spurs hit Bess's flanks before his mind caught up. They were moving hooves pounding through knee-deep snow, his rifle already in his hand. The wind cut like a blade, carrying that sound, that terrible sound that reached into his chest and grabbed hold of something he'd thought was dead. The garret place came into view. 3 walls standing, one collapsed under the weight of last week's blizzard. No smoke, no horses, no sign of life except another scream. Weaker this time. Caleb threw himself from the saddle, boots hitting frozen ground. He moved fast toward the gap in the wall, rifle raised ready for trouble. What he found stopped him cold. Children. 6 of them. Huddled together in the corner like a litter of abandoned pups, wrapped in rags and scraps of cloth that couldn't possibly be keeping them warm. The oldest, a girl, maybe 7 or 8, stood in front of the others with a rusted kitchen knife gripped in both hands. Her whole body shook, but that blade stayed pointed right at his chest. "Stay back," her voice cracked. "I'll cut you. I swear I will." Caleb didn't move. Couldn't move, because behind that fierce little warrior, 5 more faces peered out from the shadows. A boy of 9 or so, tall and thin, one arm wrapped protectively around a smaller child. 2 little girls clinging to each other. Another boy, maybe 6, coughing so hard his whole body convulsed. And the smallest, barely more than a toddler, silent and still, with enormous brown eyes. But it was the girl with the knife who held him frozen. That face, those eyes, brown with flecks of gold, the pointed chin, the way her dark hair fell across her forehead despite the matted dirt and dried tears. Charlotte. His Charlotte. No, that was impossible. Charlotte was in the ground beside her mother, beside her brother. 3 crosses on the hill behind the house. 3 stones Caleb had carved himself because he couldn't afford proper markers and couldn't stand the thought of unmarked graves. The girl thrust the knife forward. "I said stay back, mister." The movement broke the spell. Caleb lowered his rifle, slowly held up one hand. "Easy now. I ain't here to hurt nobody." "That's what the last man said." Her voice was ice. "Right before he killed my mama." Caleb's jaw tightened. "I ain't that man." "Prove it." "How did you prove something like that? How did you show a child who'd seen too much that the world still had decent people in it?" Caleb did the only thing he could think of. He set his rifle on the ground, knelt down in the snow, and started unbuttoning his coat. "What are you doing?" The girl's eyes widened. "You're freezing, all of you." He shrugged off the sheepskin coat, held it out toward her. "Take it." She didn't move. "Your lips are blue, girl. Take the coat." "Rosie." The tall boy spoke up from behind her. "Maybe we should—" "Shut up, Sam." She didn't look away from Caleb. How do we know this ain't a trick? You don't. Caleb kept his voice level. But your choice right now is trust me or freeze to death. Ain't nobody else coming up this mountain. Storm's getting worse. Another hour, 2 at most, and you won't be able to feel your hands and feet. Hour after that, you won't feel nothing at all. The little one in the back, the toddler, started to cry. Not loud, not the healthy wail of a normal child. A thin, reedy sound, like a wounded animal. Something in the girl's face cracked. Jessie, hush now. She turned slightly just enough to look at the crying child, and in that moment, Caleb saw the weight she was carrying. This wasn't just a scared little girl. This was a child who'd been forced to become a mother, a protector, a leader, when she should have been playing with dolls and picking wildflowers. Let me help. Caleb kept his voice soft. Please. The tall boy Sam stepped forward, putting himself between Rosie and the others. How do we know you won't take us back to him? Back to who? Mr. Hargrove. A smaller girl spoke up, the one with blonde hair and blue eyes, who looked at Caleb like she was memorizing his face. He owns us. Got papers and everything. Caleb's blood went cold. Nobody owns children. Tell that to the judge who signed the contracts. Sam's voice was bitter, too bitter for a 9-year-old. Tell that to the sheriff who looks the other way. Tell that to our mamas who... He stopped, throat working. Who what? Who are dead? Rosie's voice was flat. Some of them anyway. Mine is. Hannah's is. Toby's. She nodded toward the coughing boy, then the blonde girl, then the other girl with dark curly hair. Grace's mama overdosed on laudanum. Jessie's mama got sick and nobody would treat her 'cause she was Indian. And Sam's mama... She looked at the tall boy. She's still alive, far as we know. She sold me. Sam's jaw clenched. To pay debts, legal and proper. That's what they told her. Caleb stood slowly, the cold forgotten now replaced by something else. Something hot and angry that burned in his chest like a coal. Where are you running from? Hargrove's camp. Rosie finally lowered the knife just an inch. 3 days north, in the mountains. You walked 3 days in this weather in those clothes. We didn't have much choice. She lifted her chin. It was run or... She glanced at the little ones. Or worse. Caleb didn't need her to finish that sentence. He'd heard whispers over the years, the kind of whispers men shared in low voices at the saloon, about operations in the mountains that trafficked more than gold. He'd told himself those were just stories. Exaggerations. The kind of ugliness that happened somewhere else to someone else's children. Looking at these 6 faces, he knew better now. My ranch is 2 hours south, he said. Got food, fire, medicine for that cough. He looked at the boy Toby, who was still hacking into his sleeve. You let me take you there, I promise you'll be safe. You promise. Rosie said it like the word meant nothing, like she'd heard it before from other mouths and learned exactly what promises were worth. I do. And if we say no, then I'll leave my coat, ride back to town, and send someone else up here to help. But by the time they get here in this storm... He didn't finish. Didn't need to. The children looked at each other. Something passed between them, a silent conversation born of shared trauma and desperate necessity. Then Sam stepped forward. If you're lying to us, the boy said, if this is some kind of trap, you should know I killed a man once, one of Hargrove's men, when he came for Hannah. His voice shook, but his eyes didn't waver. I hit him with a rock. He went down, didn't get back up, so I know what it's like to kill someone, and I'll do it again if I have to. Caleb met the boy's eyes, saw the truth there and the horror of it. 9 years old and already carrying that weight. I believe you, Caleb said quietly, and I hope you never have to do it again. It took nearly an hour to get them all out of the barn and onto horses. Caleb put the 3 smallest, Jessie, Grace, and Toby, on Bess, with strict instructions to hold on tight. Rosie insisted on walking until Caleb pointed out that her feet were wrapped in bloody rags and she was slowing everyone down. She rode behind him on the gelding he'd brought for spare, her small arms locked around his waist, like she was ready to let go and run at the first sign of trouble. Sam walked, refused to do otherwise. "Somebody's got to keep watch," he said, and Caleb didn't argue. The boy had a look about him, the look of someone who'd learned to survive by staying alert. Hannah, the quiet blonde girl, walked too. Staying close to Sam, one hand always touching his sleeve like she needed the contact to feel safe. They didn't talk much. The wind made conversation difficult, and besides, what was there to say? These children had been through things Caleb couldn't imagine, and he was still a stranger. Trust would come with time, if it came at all. The ranch appeared through the snow just as the light started to fade. Caleb heard Grace gasp, saw her pointing at the smoke rising from the chimney. "Is that a real house?" "It is. With a real fire. The realest. And food." Toby's voice was barely a whisper between coughs. "You said there'd be food. All you can eat." He dismounted first, then reached up for the children. One by one they slid down into his arms. Grace light as a feather and still somehow smiling. Toby burning with fever, his small body limp. Jessie clutching a ragged blanket and looking at Caleb with eyes that held no expression at all. Rosie came last. She hesitated, then let him lift her down. When her feet hit the ground, she winced, and Caleb saw fresh blood seeping through those rag wrappings. "Inside," he said. "Now." The house hit them like a wave. Warm air, the smell of wood smoke, the simple presence of walls and a roof and safety. Grace started crying immediately, great gulping sobs of relief. Toby collapsed onto the nearest chair, still coughing. Hannah stood frozen in the doorway, tears streaming down her face, though she made no sound. Sam kept himself together by sheer force of will. Caleb could see it in the rigid set of his shoulders, the way his jaw was clenched so tight it had to hurt. And Rosie. Rosie walked through the room, slowly touching things. The table, the stove, the curtains at the window, like she was making sure they were real. "Whose house is this?" she asked. "Mine." "You live here alone." "I do now." She looked at the second door, the one that led to the back rooms. "What's in there?" Caleb hesitated. He hadn't opened those doors in 3 years, hadn't been able to face what was behind them. "Bedrooms," he said finally. 3 of them. They'll need airing out, but they're dry. Got blankets, got beds. We can stay here, really." He looked at her, this fierce little girl with his daughter's face and a survivor's eyes, and something shifted in his chest. Something that had been locked up for 4 years started to come loose. "Long as you need." The night was chaos in the best possible way. Caleb built up the fire until it roared. He heated water for washing, found blankets that still smelled faintly of lavender, from when Ellie used to store them with dried flowers. He dug through the cellar for every scrap of food he had dried: beef potatoes, bread he'd baked 2 days ago, preserved apples from last fall's harvest. The children ate like they'd forgotten how. Grace put away more food than seemed possible for someone her size. Sam tried to pace himself, but kept reaching for more bread. Hannah ate silently, methodically, like she was storing fuel for a journey. And Toby picked at his plate between coughs, his fever-bright eyes fixed on the fire. Only Rosie held back. "Ain't you hungry?" Caleb asked. She shrugged. "Making sure there's enough for the little ones first." His heart clenched. 7 years old, and already she'd learned to put herself last. "There's plenty. Eat." After dinner, he tended to their feet. One by one, he unwrapped the bloody rags, cleaned the wounds, picked out stones and ice crystals, and bandaged them properly. Rosie watched every move he made, cataloging it, learning like she expected to have to do this herself someday. Toby was the worst. The boy's cough had a rattle to it that Caleb didn't like, and his forehead was hot enough to fry an egg. He needed a doctor, real medicine, things Caleb didn't have. "How long has he been sick?" Caleb asked Sam, who seemed to know the most about each child's history. "Started in the mines. Dust got in his lungs, they said. Been coughing ever since. The mines? Hargrove runs a gold operation. Kids work better in the small tunnels, he says. Less pay, less food, less trouble. Sam's voice was flat. Toby was underground 12 hours a day before we ran. Caleb closed his eyes. When he opened them, Sam was watching him with a strange expression. You're angry, the boy said. Damn right I'm angry. At us. At the men who did this to you. At a world that lets it happen. Caleb shook his head. Not at you. Never at you. Something in Sam's rigid posture softened just a fraction. Most folks don't care what happens to kids like us. We're just... He searched for the word. Property. That's what Hargrove calls us. You ain't property. Law says different. Then the law is wrong. It was a simple statement, but the way the children's heads all turned toward him, the way hope flickered briefly in their eyes before they shut it down, that told Caleb everything he needed to know about what they'd been through. He put them to bed in shifts, 2 to a room, with instructions to keep the doors open so the heat could flow through. Grace and Hannah took the room that had been Charlotte's, curling up together on the small bed like puppies in a pile. Toby and Jessie got Benjamin's old room. Toby propped up on pillows to help him breathe, Jessie clutching his ragged blanket and staring at the ceiling. Sam insisted on sleeping in the main room near the door. In case anyone comes, he said. Nobody's coming. You don't know that. Caleb didn't argue. The boy needed to feel useful, needed to believe he was protecting the others. That was his way of coping, same as Rosie's fierce independence was hers. Which left Rosie herself. She stood in the doorway of the master bedroom, the room Caleb hadn't entered since Ellie died, and stared at the dusty quilt, the empty fireplace, the photograph on the bedside table. Is that her? She asked. Your wife. Caleb stepped up behind her, looked at the faded image of Ellie on their wedding day, young, beautiful, alive in a way that made his chest ache. That's her? She's pretty. Rosie's voice was small. What happened to her? Fever. Same one that took our children. How many? 2. Benjamin was 5. Charlotte was 3. Rosie was quiet for a long moment. Then, I look like her, don't I? Your daughter. Caleb's throat closed up. Yeah, you do. Is that why you helped us, because I look like her? It was the kind of question only a child could ask, cutting straight to the heart of things without any adult pretense. It's why I stopped, Caleb admitted. But it ain't why I brought you here. I brought you here because what's happening to you is wrong, and I can't just ride past wrong and pretend I didn't see it. Rosie turned to look at him, really look, and for the first time some of the wariness in her eyes eased. Mama used to say most folks are good if you give them half a chance. Smart woman, your mama. She was the bravest person I ever knew. Rosie's voice wavered just for a second. Mr. Hargrove, he wanted to buy me. Said I'd bring a good price on account of... She stopped, jaw-clenching. On account of what? On account of I'm pretty. That's what he said. Pretty girls are worth more. Rage, white-hot and murderous, flooded Caleb's veins. He forced himself to keep breathing, to keep his face calm for the child's sake. Your mama said no. She said she'd die first. Rosie's composure cracked. So he beat her, made me watch, said it was a lesson about what happens when people say no to him. And when she grabbed a knife, tried to fight back, the tears came now streaming down her dirty face. He shot her, right there in front of everyone. And then he told his men to come get me. But you ran. Mama told me to. Last thing she ever said. Run and don't look back. So I did. Found the others along the way, kids who'd escaped or been left behind or were just trying to survive. We stuck together. Watched out for each other. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. That's the only way any of us made it this far. Caleb knelt down, bringing himself to her eye level. Rosie, listen to me. What happened to your mama wasn't your fault. And what that man did, what he was going to do, none of that was your fault either. You understand." She shook her head. "If I wasn't pretty, if I was ugly or plain, Mama might still be alive." "No." His voice was firm. "Your mama died because a bad man made a bad choice. That's on him. Not on you. Not ever on you." For a long moment she just looked at him. Then slowly she stepped forward and wrapped her thin arms around his neck. Caleb froze. He hadn't been hugged in 4 years. Hadn't held a child since Charlotte hadn't felt that particular weight of small arms trusting him to keep them safe. Then he hugged her back gently, carefully, like she might break. "You're safe now," he said into her hair. "I promise. Don't make promises you can't keep. This one I can." She pulled back, looked at him with those 2 old eyes. "He'll come for us, you know, Mr. Hargrove. He doesn't let anyone go. Let him come. You don't understand. He has men, lots of them, guns, money, the law on his side." "I survived a war," Caleb said quietly. "Buried my whole family. Spent 4 years wanting to die and not having the courage to do it." He touched her cheek, brushed away a tear. "I ain't afraid of some mine owner with delusions of godhood. And I sure as hell ain't letting him take you or any of those other children. That's a promise too." Rosie stared at him for a long moment. Then she nodded once like she was accepting a contract. "Okay. Okay. Okay. I'll trust you. For now." She turned toward the bed, then looked back. "But I'm sleeping with the knife." Despite everything, Caleb felt the corner of his mouth twitch. Fair enough. He gave her the master bedroom, found extra blankets, lit a small fire in the hearth. Then he went back to the main room where Sam was sitting with his back to the wall, eyes fixed on the door. "You should sleep," Caleb said. "Can't." "Why not?" "Every time I close my eyes, I see it." Sam's voice was barely a whisper. "The man I killed. His face when he went down. The sound his head made when it hit the rock." Caleb sat down beside him, keeping a respectful distance. "How old are you, son?" 9. "That's too young to be carrying what you're carrying." Sam's laugh was bitter. "Didn't have much choice." "What happened?" The boy was quiet for a long time. Then, "His name was Burke, one of Hargrove's men. He used to watch Hannah the way a wolf watches a lamb, made comments, touched her hair when he walked by. She was scared all the time, jumping at shadows, barely eating." Sam's hands clenched into fists. "One night I heard her scream, ran to find him dragging her toward the back buildings where they keep the—" "I understand." "I grabbed the first thing I could find, a rock big as my fist. Hit him once, twice, kept hitting him until he stopped moving." Sam's voice went flat, empty. "Then I grabbed Hannah and we ran, found Rosie and the others, and we just kept running." Caleb was quiet for a moment, processing. Then he said, "You saved her life." "I took a life." "Sometimes that's the same thing." Sam looked at him, really looked, and Caleb saw the boy underneath the survivor, scared, broken, desperate for someone to tell him he wasn't a monster. "What you did wasn't murder," Caleb said firmly. "What you did was protection. There's a difference. A man comes for a child with evil intent and you stop him. That's not a sin. That's justice." "Doesn't feel like justice?" "No, it never does." Caleb leaned back against the wall. "I killed men in the war. Lots of them. Some were shooting at me, some were just in the way. And every one of them had a mother, a father, maybe a wife, maybe children. Every one of them was someone's son. How do you live with it?" "Some days I don't." He looked at the fire, at the shadows dancing on the walls. "Some days, the weight of it feels like it's going to crush me. But then I remember why I did it, to protect the men beside me, to end a war that was tearing the country apart, to come home to my family." His voice caught. "And even though my family's gone now, the reasons were still good. The cause was still just. Same as yours. Sam was quiet for a long time. Then, I've never told anyone the whole story before. What Burke was going to do to Hannah. What I did to stop him. You told me. Yeah. Sam looked at him, something shifting in his eyes. I guess I did. Get some sleep, son. I'll keep watch. But I said I'll keep watch. You've been protecting these kids for how long? 3 days a week. 2 weeks, since we left the camp. 2 weeks. You're 9 years old, and you've been the man of this group for 2 weeks. That's enough. Tonight you're just a boy. You're safe, and you can rest. The tears came then, silent and sudden. Sam wiped them away, fast ashamed, but Caleb pretended not to notice. Okay, Sam whispered. Okay. He lay down where he was on the floor near the door and was asleep within minutes. The kind of exhausted, dreamless sleep that comes from finally feeling safe enough to let go. Caleb sat in the dark, rifle across his knees, watching the fire burn down to embers. 6 children. 6 stories of horror and survival. 6 lives that had somehow found their way to his door. He thought about Ellie, about what she would say if she could see him now. She'd always wanted more children, had talked about filling the house with little ones, giving Benjamin and Charlotte a whole pack of siblings to run wild with. Life had had other plans. Or maybe this was the plan all along. Maybe everything, the war, the ranch, the fever, the 4 years of grief, had been leading him to this exact moment. This abandoned barn. These 6 faces looking up at him from the shadows. Maybe he'd been broken so that he could understand what broken looked like in others. Or maybe that was just the kind of nonsense a man told himself at midnight when he was trying to make sense of a senseless world. Either way, it didn't matter. What mattered was that these children were here now in his house under his protection. And come hell or high water, he was going to keep them safe. He didn't know yet that Silas Hargrove was already on their trail. Didn't know that the man had sent riders out the same day. The children escaped, tracking them through the snow with dogs and guns, and the kind of cold determination that made ordinary evil look tame. Didn't know that in 3 days' time those riders would reach his gate. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty, a truth that burned in his chest like an ember that refused to die. He'd kill every last one of them before he let them take these children. Every last one. The fire popped, sending up a shower of sparks. Outside, the wind howled against the windows like something trying to get in. And Caleb Thornton, who'd spent 4 years wishing he was dead, finally remembered what it felt like to have something worth living for. The first light of dawn came gray and cold through the frost-covered windows. Caleb hadn't slept, hadn't even tried. He'd spent the night watching, listening, waiting for trouble that hadn't come yet but surely would. Sam was still asleep on the floor, curled up like a dog guarding the door. The boy's face looked younger in sleep, softer, more like the child he should have been, instead of the soldier he'd been forced to become. Caleb rose quietly, added wood to the fire, and started making breakfast. Eggs from the chickens he'd almost sold last month. Bacon from the pig he'd slaughtered in the fall. Biscuits from flour he'd bought in town 3 weeks ago, when going to town still felt like a chore instead of a lifeline. The smell of food brought them out one by one. Grace first, padding on bandaged feet, her dark curls wild from sleep. She stopped in the doorway, eyes huge. "It wasn't a dream," she whispered. "No, sweetheart, it wasn't. We're really here, in a real house with real food. Real as it gets." She burst into tears. Not sad tears, Caleb realized, but the overwhelming kind that came when something too good to believe turned out to be true. He knelt down and she ran into his arms, sobbing against his shoulder. "It's okay," he said, patting her back awkwardly. "You're safe now. Mama said I'd find somewhere safe. Before she went to sleep and didn't wake up. She said I'd find someone good." Caleb's throat closed up. "Your mama was right." Hannah appeared next, silent as always, watching from the shadows, until Grace pulled away and reached for her. The two girls held hands, and Hannah's eyes met Caleb's for just a moment. She didn't speak, but something in her expression shifted. Acknowledgement, maybe. The beginning of trust. Then Toby, still coughing, still burning with fever, but walking on his own 2 feet. The boy looked at the food on the stove, and his eyes filled with wonder. "Is that bacon?" "It is." "I ain't had bacon since—" He trailed off, trying to remember. "I don't know since when." "Then you're overdue. Sit down." Rosie came out carrying Jessie on her hip, the toddler's face buried against her neck, his small fist clutching that ragged blanket like it was the only thing keeping him tethered to the world. She looked at Caleb, at the food, at the other children already settling around the table. "You cook?" she asked. "Had to learn after my wife passed. Wasn't going to starve." Most men would have just gone to the saloon. Most men didn't have a ranch to run. She almost smiled. Almost. Then she sat down Jessie in her lap and reached for a biscuit. They ate in silence at first, the kind of desperate eating that came from not knowing when the next meal would arrive. Caleb had to remind them twice to slow down, that there was plenty, that nobody was going to take it away. It was Sam who finally spoke. "What happens now?" Caleb set down his coffee cup. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we can't stay here forever. Hargrove's men will come looking. They always do." "Let them come." "You keep saying that." Sam's voice was tight. "But you don't know him. You don't know what he's capable of." "Then tell me." The children exchanged looks. That silent communication again, the kind that came from shared trauma and desperate necessity. Rosie spoke first. "Silas Hargrove runs the biggest gold operation in the Northern Territory, legal on the surface, got papers for everything, licenses, contracts, partnerships with important men in Denver and Cheyenne. But underneath," Caleb prompted, "underneath he runs children." Sam's jaw clenched. "Buys them, steals them, takes them from mothers who can't pay their debts. Puts them to work in the mines because we're small enough to fit in the tunnels where grown men can't go. And when we can't work anymore," Toby's voice was barely a whisper, "when we get sick or hurt or too big for the tunnels." Nobody answered. Nobody had to. Caleb's hands gripped the edge of the table so hard, the wood creaked. "How many children are still up there?" 20, maybe more." Rosie shifted Jessie to her other hip. "New ones coming in all the time? Old ones?" She stopped. "Disappearing," Sam finished. "That's what they called it. When a kid got sick or tried to run or just stopped being useful, they'd disappear. And nobody does anything, no law, no government. Hargrove owns the law up there." Hannah's voice startled them all. She spoke so rarely that when she did, it carried weight. "The sheriff's on his payroll, the judge too, and the territorial marshal owes him money." "How do you know that?" I listened. Her blue eyes were steady. "When they thought I was too scared or too stupid to understand. But I understood everything." Caleb looked at her with new respect. "What else did you hear?" "That Hargrove has connections all the way to Washington. Politicians who look the other way because the gold keeps flowing and the money keeps coming. That he's untouchable because he knows things about important men, things that would ruin them if they came out." "Nobody's untouchable." "That's what my mama said." Rosie's voice was quiet. Right before he touched her. The silence that followed was heavy with grief and rage. Caleb stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the snow-covered valley. His valley, his land, the place he'd built with his own hands, where he'd buried his family and spent 4 years trying to die without having the courage to actually do it. "There's a town called Buffalo, about 30 miles south," he said. "Got a real marshal there, man named Jonas Sterling. I served with his brother in the war." "You think he'll help?" Sam asked. "I think he'll listen. And sometimes listening is the first step. What if it's not enough?" Caleb turned back to face them. 6 children, 6 pairs of eyes, all watching him with a mixture of hope and fear. "Then we'll find another way." But I ain't sending you back to that monster. Not today, not ever. You understand me." Rosie held his gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Okay. Okay. Okay, we'll trust you. We'll try your way first." It wasn't much, but it was something. A crack in the wall she'd built around herself, a window through which light might eventually shine. The morning passed in a blur of activity. Caleb checked their wounds, changed bandages, forced Toby to drink honey water for his cough. The boy's fever worried him more with each passing hour. He needed real medicine, a real doctor, things that were 30 miles away in Buffalo. But leaving meant exposing them. The road was dangerous in winter, especially with 6 children in tow. And if Hargrove's men were already tracking them, someone's coming. Sam's voice cut through Caleb's thoughts. The boy was at the window face, pale hands clenched into fists. Caleb crossed to him in 3 strides, looked out at the valley below. Riders. 4 of them maybe half a mile out, moving fast, despite the deep snow. "Is it them?" Grace's voice trembled. "I don't know yet." Caleb grabbed his rifle. "Everyone back room. Now." "But," Rosie started. "Now. And stay quiet no matter what you hear." They moved. Even Jesse, somehow sensing the danger, made no sound as Rosie carried him through the doorway. Sam hesitated, looking back. "I should stay. Help you. You should protect the others. That's your job right now." "But, Sam." Caleb's voice was firm but gentle. "You've done enough fighting for 10 lifetimes. Let me handle this one." Something flickered in the boy's eyes. Relief, maybe. Or gratitude. He nodded once, then disappeared into the back room. Caleb checked his rifle, made sure it was loaded, then stepped out onto the porch. The riders came up the trail in single file, steam rising from their horses' flanks. Not Hargrove's men, Caleb realized with relief. The lead rider wore a deputy's star, and behind him came 3 men in ordinary clothes with the look of townspeople pressed into service. The deputy pulled up short when he saw Caleb, took in the rifle, the hard expression the way he stood blocking the door. "Caleb Thornton." "That's right." "Deputy Webb from Buffalo." The man dismounted slowly, keeping his hands visible. "Marshal Sterling sent us. Said you might have trouble coming your way." "How'd he know?" "Riders came through town yesterday asking questions. Mean-looking bunch, well armed. Said they were looking for runaway laborers from a mining operation up north." Webb's eyes narrowed. "Said these laborers were children." "And what did the marshal say to that?" "Said there's no such thing as a runaway child. Just children running from something bad." Webb stepped forward. "He sent us to see if you needed help." Caleb studied the man. Young, maybe mid-20s, with honest eyes and a jaw that looked like it knew how to take a punch. The kind of face you wanted to trust. "How many children?" Webb asked. 6. Something shifted in the deputy's expression, anger carefully controlled. "Hargrove's operation?" "That's what they tell me." "Son of a bitch." Webb turned, spat in the snow. "We've heard rumors about that camp for years. Never could prove anything. Never could get close enough. They say he's got the law in his pocket up there." "Maybe up there, not in Buffalo, not with Marshal Sterling." Webb met Caleb's eyes. "Sir, if you've got 6 children who can testify about what's happening in those mines, that's evidence. Real evidence. The kind that can bring a man down no matter how many politicians he owns. These children have been through hell. I ain't putting them through more trauma just to satisfy the law." "I understand that, but if Hargrove gets them back—" Webb didn't finish. Didn't need to. Caleb was quiet for a moment, weighing options. Then he said, "You'd better come inside." He introduced the deputies to the children, one at a time, letting each child decide how much distance they wanted to keep. Sam stayed close to Hannah, his protective instincts on full alert. Rosie kept Jesse in her arms, watching the newcomers with wary eyes. Grace surprisingly walked right up to Deputy Webb and looked at his badge. Is that real? It is. Does it mean you help people? It means I try to. Good. She nodded firmly. Because we need a lot of help. Webb crouched down to her level. What's your name? Grace. Grace Holloway. My mama's in heaven now, but before she went, she said angels would look out for me. She studied his face. Are you an angel? Something softened in the deputy's expression. No, sweetheart. Just a man trying to do what's right. That's what Mr. Caleb said too. Grace turned to look at Caleb, and she smiled. Really smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from any of them. Maybe that's what angels look like when they're pretending to be people. The next few hours were spent planning. Deputy Webb explained that Marshal Sterling had already sent word to the territorial governor alerting him to the situation. If Hargrove tried to claim legal ownership of the children, he'd have to do it through proper channels, which meant time, which meant opportunity. But that only works if we can keep the children safe until the legal process plays out, Webb said. Hargrove won't wait for courts. He'll come himself or send enough men to take what he wants. How many men does he have? Last count maybe 20 regular employees, plus however many guns he can hire when he needs them. Caleb did the math in his head. 4 deputies himself against 20 or more armed men. Not good odds. We need more people, he said. Working on it. Webb rubbed his jaw. Marshall's putting together a posse, but it takes time. Folks are scared of Hargrove. His reach is long, and his memory's longer. What about the army? There's a fort 2 days east. Already sent a rider. But the army moves slow, and they don't like getting involved in civilian matters unless there's proof of serious crimes. Children being enslaved isn't serious enough. It is to us. It is to any decent person. But to some colonel sitting behind a desk, it's a local matter until someone proves otherwise. Caleb wanted to hit something, wanted to ride up to that camp himself and burn it to the ground. But that wouldn't help the 6 children depending on him. That would just get him killed and leave them alone again. So we wait, he said. We wait, we prepare, and we pray Hargrove gives us enough time. He didn't. They came at dusk on the 3rd day. Caleb was in the barn checking on the horses when Sam came running through the snow. Riders, the boy gasped. Coming up the valley, lots of them. Caleb didn't ask questions, just grabbed his rifle and ran. From the porch he counted them. 8, no 10 riders spreading out across the valley floor, like a net closing around prey. At their head, a man in a black coat on a black horse, sitting ramrod straight like a general surveying a battlefield. Silas Hargrove. Deputy Webb was already there, his men taking positions behind the water trough, the woodpile, the corner of the barn. Not great cover, but better than nothing. That's him, Caleb asked. That's him. Doesn't look like much. Neither does a rattlesnake until it bites you. The riders stopped about 50 yards out, close enough to talk but far enough to have running room if things went sideways. Hargrove sat motionless for a long moment, studying the ranch, the men, the defensive positions. Then he smiled. Mr. Thornton. His voice carried across the cold air, smooth and pleasant. I believe you have something that belongs to me. I don't believe I do. 6 children. Runaway laborers from my mining operation. Contracted legally and properly through their surviving parents or guardians. Hargrove pulled a stack of papers from his coat. I have documentation. Signed, witnessed, filed with the territorial office. I don't care if you have a letter from the president. Those children ain't going anywhere. I'm afraid that's not your decision to make. Hargrove's smile never wavered. The law is quite clear on matters of contract labor. These children are my legal responsibility until their terms of service are complete. Deputy Webb stepped forward. Mr. Hargrove, I'm Deputy Jonas Webb from Buffalo. I'm going to have to ask you to take this matter up with the courts. Courts? Hargrove laughed softly. Deputy, with all due respect, I have judges who owe me their careers. I have politicians who would rather die than see certain information made public. The courts are mine. Not in Buffalo. Everywhere. The pleasantness drained from Hargrove's voice. You're young. You don't understand how the world works yet. But you will. When this is over, you'll understand that power isn't about badges or laws. It's about who's willing to do what needs to be done. Is that a threat? It's a fact. Hargrove turned his attention back to Caleb. Mr. Thornton, I'm told you're a reasonable man, a veteran, a rancher who keeps to himself and minds his own business. So I'm going to give you one chance to be reasonable. I'm listening. Give me the children. All 6 of them. In return, I'll pay you $500 for your trouble, and forget this ever happened. You can go back to your cattle, and your silence, and your grief. Nobody else needs to get hurt. $500. More money than Caleb had seen in years. Enough to pay off debts, buy new stock, rebuild the ranch into something thriving. Blood money. Every cent of it soaked in the suffering of children. Go to hell, Caleb said. Hargrove's smile flickered. I was hoping you'd say that. It makes what comes next so much simpler. He raised one hand, and his men started forward. Everyone down, Caleb shouted. The first shot came from Hargrove's side, wild and high, splintering the porch rail. Caleb returned fire, saw one rider jerk and fall. The deputies opened up from their positions, and suddenly the valley was full of noise and smoke and chaos. Caleb moved without thinking. The old instincts from the war taking over. Fire. Chamber. Fire. Find cover. Keep moving. Don't let them pin you down. A bullet whined past his ear. Another punched through the barn door behind him. He dropped 2 more men, saw Webb take down a third. But there were too many. They were being overrun. Then from inside the house a sound that turned Caleb's blood to ice. A child screaming. He sprinted for the door, burst through, and found chaos. One of Hargrove's men had come in through the back window. He had Grace by the arm, was dragging her toward the broken glass while she kicked and clawed and screamed. Sam was on the floor, blood streaming from a cut on his head. Rosie stood in front of the other children with her rusty knife, but she was trembling, outmatched, terrified. Caleb didn't hesitate. He raised his rifle and fired. The man went down, releasing Grace, who scrambled away on hands and knees. Caleb stepped over the body without looking at it, positioned himself between the children and the window. Everyone okay? Sam's hurt. Rosie's voice shook. And Toby won't wake up. Caleb looked at the younger boy lying still and pale on the cot. The fever had gotten worse, much worse. No time to deal with that now. Stay down. Stay quiet. Don't move from this room. He went back to the fight. It was over faster than he expected. Not because they won, but because Hargrove suddenly pulled his men back. Caleb watched them retreat, confused, until he saw the reason. Riders coming from the south. A lot of them. 20, maybe more, with the glint of sunlight on badges and the organized movement of trained men. Marshal Sterling had arrived. Hargrove saw them too. His face went rigid, calculating, adapting. Then he wheeled his horse around and shouted for his men to fall back. "This isn't over, Thornton," he called as he rode. "I have rights. I have papers. The law is on my side." "Then come back with the law," Caleb shouted after him. "But don't bring guns to a fight you started." Hargrove didn't respond, just disappeared into the trees with his surviving men, leaving their dead behind in the snow. Deputy Webb appeared at Caleb's side, blood on his sleeve from a graze, but otherwise intact. "You okay?" "I'll live." "The children?" "Scared. One of the boys is hurt, the one with the fever. Need to get him to a doctor." Marshal Sterling brought one. Figured we'd need medical attention one way or another. The next hour was a blur of activity. The doctor, a gray-haired man with kind eyes and steady hands, examined each of the children, while Marshal Sterling took stock of the situation. 4 of Hargrove's men dead, 2 more wounded and captured. No casualties on their side, though Deputy Webb would carry a scar on his arm for the rest of his life. But it was Toby who worried everyone most. Pneumonia, the doctor said quietly, stepping away from the cot where the boy lay struggling for breath. Probably been building for weeks. The exposure and stress made it worse. Can you help him? I can try, but he needs to be in town in a proper bed with proper medicine. And even then, the doctor shook his head. He's very weak. It could go either way. Caleb looked at Toby's small face, pale as the snow outside, and felt something crack inside him. This boy had survived the mines, survived the escape, survived 3 days in the wilderness. He couldn't die now. Not when they were finally safe. Do whatever you have to do, Caleb said. Whatever it costs. Just save him. Marshal Sterling was a tall man with gray at his temples and the kind of presence that made people stand straighter when he walked into a room. He listened to the whole story from the children's escape to Hargrove's attack without interrupting. When Caleb finished, Sterling was quiet for a long moment. My brother spoke highly of you, he finally said. Said you were the bravest man in the regiment. Said you saved his life at Antietam. He saved mine first. That's what he said you'd say. Sterling almost smiled. Mr. Thornton, what you've done here taking in these children standing up to a man like Hargrove, that takes a different kind of courage than warfare. The kind that doesn't get medals. Don't want medals. Just want those children safe. They will be. I'm taking personal responsibility for this case. Hargrove's papers might hold up in some corrupt mountain court, but they won't hold up in mine. He'll fight it? Let him. I've been waiting years for an excuse to go after that operation. Now I've got 6 witnesses, 4 dead bodies, and a pattern of behavior that no judge can ignore. Sterling's expression hardened. His empire's going to fall, Mr. Thornton. It might take time, but it's going to fall. That night, with guards posted and the children finally asleep, Caleb sat on the porch and watched the stars. Rosie found him there, wrapped in one of Ellie's old quilts, her feet still bandaged, but healing. You should be in bed, he said. Couldn't sleep. She sat down beside him, pulling the quilt tighter. I keep thinking about what happens next. What do you mean? When this is over? When Hargrove's gone? What happens to us? Caleb was quiet for a moment. It was a question he'd been avoiding not because he didn't know the answer, but because he was afraid of it. What do you want to happen? Rosie was silent for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was small, uncertain, completely unlike the fierce warrior who'd held a knife on him 3 days ago. I want to stay here. With you. She looked up at him, and in the starlight, she looked even more like Charlotte. I know that's probably stupid. You didn't ask for 6 kids to show up on your doorstep. You've got your own life, your own grief, but this is the first place I've felt safe since Mama died. The first place that felt like it could be home. Caleb's throat tightened. Rosie, you don't have to say yes. I know we're a lot. I know Toby's sick and Sam has nightmares and Jesse won't talk and Hannah barely eats. I know we're broken in ways that might never heal. But, Rosie. She stopped, looked at him with those 2 old eyes. I buried my family 4 years ago, Caleb said slowly. My wife, my son, my daughter. And I spent every day since then, wishing I could join them. Not having the courage to do it, but not having any reason to live either. Just existing, taking up space, waiting for it to be over. Rosie's expression shifted. Fear. She thought he was going to say no. Then I heard you scream, he continued. Found 6 children who needed someone to fight for them. And for the first time in 4 years, I remembered what it felt like to have a purpose, to have something worth protecting. He reached over, took her small hand in his rough one. You want to stay here? All 6 of you. Then you stay. This is your home now, for as long as you want it. The tears came then streaming down her face, and she didn't try to hide them. You mean it? I mean it. She threw herself into his arms, sobbing against his chest, and Caleb held her while the stars wheeled overhead, and the world for just a moment felt like it might actually be okay. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." "No." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Thank you for reminding me what it means to be alive." They sat there for a long time, watching the night, listening to the silence. And somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, lonely and wild. But Caleb didn't feel lonely anymore. For the first time in 4 years, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. 3 days passed like a held breath. Toby fought the fever with everything he had, which wasn't much. The doctor stayed at the ranch, checking on the boy every few hours, adjusting medicines, keeping his small body propped up so he could breathe. Caleb took turns sitting with him through the long nights, wiping the sweat from his forehead, talking to him even when he wasn't sure the boy could hear. "You got to fight, son. You hear me? These other kids need you. Sam needs someone to help him keep watch. Grace needs someone to laugh at her jokes. And I reckon Hannah needs someone quiet like her to sit with." Toby's eyes fluttered open on the third morning, weak, confused, but alive. "Mr. Caleb, right here. Did we make it? Are we safe?" Caleb took the boy's thin hand in his own. "We made it. You made it, and yeah, we're safe." A tear slid down Toby's pale cheek. "Mama always said I was too stubborn to die. Your mama was a smart woman. She's gone now, like everyone else's mama." "I know, son. I know." Toby's fingers tightened on his. "Are you gonna be our papa now? Rosie said you might be." The question hit Caleb like a punch to the chest. He looked at this sick, scared little boy who'd been through hell and somehow still had hope left in him. "Would you want that?" "I ain't never had a papa. Not really. The men at the camp, they said papas were supposed to protect you. Keep you safe." Toby's voice was barely a whisper. "You did that. You came for us when nobody else would." Caleb had to look away, had to blink hard against the burning in his eyes. "Get some rest, Toby. We'll talk more when you're stronger. Promise you won't leave." "I promise." The boy smiled just a little and closed his eyes. Within minutes, his breathing had evened out into real sleep, not the fevered thrashing of before. The doctor came in an hour later, checked Toby's vitals, and nodded slowly. "Fever's breaking. He's going to make it." Caleb let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. "You're sure?" "Sure as I can be about anything in medicine. He'll need weeks of rest, good food, plenty of fluids. But the worst is past." The doctor studied Caleb's face. "You care about these children. They needed someone to care. That's not an answer." "It's the only one I got." The doctor smiled. "Fair enough. I'll be back in a few days to check on him. In the meantime, try to get some sleep yourself. You look worse than he does." But sleep didn't come easy. Every time Caleb closed his eyes, he saw Hargrove's face. That cold smile. That absolute certainty that he would win because he'd always won before. Marshal Sterling had left 2 deputies at the ranch and taken the rest of his men back to Buffalo to prepare for the legal battle ahead. He'd promised to send word as soon as anything changed, but so far, the only news was silence. Hargrove was regrouping. Planning. Caleb could feel it like a storm building on the horizon. On the 4th day, Sam found him in the barn repairing a saddle that didn't need repairing. "Can I help?" Caleb looked up at the boy. The cut on Sam's forehead had scabbed over, leaving a thin red line that would probably scar. Another mark on a child who already carried too many. "You know anything about leather work?" "No, sir." "Then sit down, and I'll teach you." They worked in silence for a while, Sam watching Caleb's hands, learning the rhythm of punch and stitch, the way the awl moved through tough hide. "I've been thinking," Sam finally said. "About what?" "About what happens when Hargrove comes back. Because he will. Men like him don't give up." "No, they don't." "So what do we do?" Caleb sat down. They all looked at the boy directly. We prepare. We stay alert. And when he comes, we fight. I can fight. I killed that man Burke. I could do it again if I had to. I know you could. But that ain't what I want for you. What do you want for me? It was such a simple question asked in such a plain voice that Caleb almost didn't know how to answer. I want you to be a boy, he said finally. Just a boy, playing and learning and growing up without having to worry about killing anybody or keeping anyone alive. I want you to have the childhood you should have had. Sam's jaw tightened. That childhood's gone. Can't get it back. No, but you can have what's left. You can have now. You can have tomorrow. And if tomorrow brings Hargrove's men, then I'll handle it. That's my job now, not yours. Sam was quiet for a long moment. Then, so softly, Caleb almost didn't hear. I don't know how to stop being scared. You don't stop. You just learn to live with it. Learn to push through it. Caleb reached over, put a hand on the boy's shoulder. Being brave ain't about not being scared. It's about being scared and doing what's right anyway. You've been doing that your whole life, Sam. You just didn't know what to call it. Sam's eyes got wet, but he didn't cry. Caleb suspected he'd forgotten how. My mama sold me, the boy whispered. To pay debts. Said she had no choice. I'm sorry. I keep thinking maybe if I'd been better, maybe if I'd worked harder or caused less trouble or... Sam, look at me. Caleb waited until the boy's eyes met his. What your mama did wasn't your fault. It was her choice, her failure, not yours. You were a child. You deserved to be protected, not sold. And if she couldn't see, that couldn't find another way that's on her, not you. But she's my mama. I know. And you can love her and still be angry at what she did. Those things can both be true. Sam sat with that for a while, turning it over in his mind. Then he asked, Did you love your family before they died? More than anything in the world. What were they like? Caleb hadn't talked about Ellie and the children in years, hadn't let himself. But something about Sam's quiet earnestness made the words come easier than he expected. My wife Ellie, she was the strongest person I ever knew. Not strong like lifting heavy things, though she could do that too. Strong like standing up for what was right even when it cost her. She used to take food to the families in town who couldn't afford it. Stayed up all night with sick neighbors. Never asked for anything in return. He smiled at the memory. She had a laugh that could fill a room. Made you want to be funnier just to hear it. And your kids? Benjamin was 5 when he died. Curious about everything. Always asking why, until you wanted to tear your hair out. But then he'd figure something out, put 2 and 2 together, and his whole face would light up like Christmas morning. Caleb's voice caught. Charlotte was 3. Sweetest child you ever saw. Used to follow me around the ranch like a little shadow wanting to help with everything. She'd sing to the chickens, told me it made them lay more eggs. Did it? You know what I think maybe it did. Sam almost smiled. Rosie looks like her. Charlotte.